Hi everyone! Today I want to talk to you about something that I've noticed quite often in terms of people that I've worked with or people in my personal life or even in myself, in terms of how different types, especially types that use different cognitive functions, relate to their own core values. I think there are some stereotypes that we need to debunk with respect to this, but at the same time, I've noticed some patterns that I will want to share with you. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. So, with respect to the topic of core values, the reason why I want to talk to you about this is because I believe that values are one of the ways in which people can really learn to create a life on their own terms. And this is something that I deeply believe in, because the more we invest in our self-awareness, regardless of the types of tools that we use, the better we feel and the more fulfillment, the more meaning, the more purpose we find in our lives. One of these tools is discovering our core values. There's a lot of psychological research which points towards the fact that once people live according to their core values, which usually are about 2 or 3, they feel much more satisfied and happy in their lives. One of my friends is also a psychotherapist, and during her degree in psychology, she also conducted her own research, her own experiments on core values and how they relate to people's happiness and fulfillment in relationships. And what she found was that the highest predictor of happiness in romantic relationships was how much the partners were living that relationship and their life outside of it in relationship to their core values. There's also a lot of research in cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, which points towards the fact that if we intentionally spend a few core actions every day, which are based on our core values, we feel much more happier, much more fulfilled. Now, in terms of different types and different cognitive functions, I've noticed some patterns that relate to how people perceive their core values and how people work with their core values. And I thought I could share this with you in case you think it is helpful for your own personal development and self-awareness journey. Now, one of the stereotypes is that FI, or introverted feeling, especially in high FI types, like all the FPs, is associated with values. And I see this extremist kind of belief that only FP types know their values or care about their values, which is not true, of course. However, what is true is that FP types, or people who have a strong introverted feeling function, have a stronger ability to kind of rely on their core values, or maybe they care about their core values a little bit more than other types. Perhaps they also gain a little bit more wisdom or more focus in their decision-making process from those core values. But this doesn't mean necessarily that FP types know their core values better than other people. It also doesn't mean that other people or other types are unable to understand their values and live a life according to their values. So let's break this down. First, I want to define core values from the perspective of psychological research. Core values are usually 2 or 3 aspects that are really, really important to us and that bring most happiness, fulfillment in our lives if we do things according to them, and which also make us really unhappy if we kind of subtract them from our lives. Core values can be things like family, love, connection, growth, purpose, meaning, spirituality, practicality, money, development, friendship, communication, and so on and so forth. Tradition, excellence, competence. Yeah, so anyone can have any of these values, okay? And I'm pretty sure that as you listen me talking about them, you also relate to a lot of these. Like you say, oh yeah, of course love is important, of course connection is important, of course growth is important, and so on and so forth. They tend to be positive in most people's understanding. However, usually 2 or 3 of these will represent the aspects that you care about the most, and in the absence of which you suffer the most. One exercise that you can do in order to discover or to clarify your core values is to think about 2 or 3 situations in your life where you were extremely happy and extremely satisfied, and then 2 or 3 situations where you felt like you were unhappy and unsuccessful and something really important was missing from your life. Try to do this reflection exercise. Try to kind of write a little bit about those situations and why you were happy and successful versus why you were unhappy or unsuccessful. And most of the time, the reason why you were happy versus unhappy is very much related to how your core values were fulfilled or reflected in that situation or in that period. Of course, when we talk about unsuccessful or unhappy, try not to go into very traumatic situations like someone's death or grieving processes, because that will be a bad situation for anybody, regardless of your core values. But you can think of things like, oh, I really didn't like that specific job that I had, or I was really unhappy in that specific job, and try to figure out why. Or I was really unhappy in a specific romantic relationship, and what was it that was missing? What value was it that it was not fulfilled? Or you can think about situations where, I don't know, you had a difficult friendship with someone and you were really annoyed and unhappy in that situation. Or your work-life balance was in a particular way, or your lifestyle was in a particular way, and it was really unfulfilling. That's what I mean with unhappy or unsuccessful. And in terms of successful or happy, think about situations where you felt really connected to someone, or you had a job or a project that you worked on and you really loved it and you felt like you were really good at it, really happy with it. Think about people that you spent time with or had relationships with where you felt really good. That's kind of what I mean, okay? So everybody's able to do this exercise and everybody can discover their core values. It might take you a little bit longer or less depending on several factors, but nonetheless, regardless of your type, you can identify these values. Now, what I have noticed with respect to the differences between cognitive functions is that people who have high FI have a better grasp of these values on a very emotional, abstract level. And they are usually the people who struggle to articulate these values verbally, to say, oh, I value this and this and this. Like, I don't know, freedom and independence and family, or connection and growth and love. Because like Carl Jung described introverted feeling in psychological types, these people tend to have such a strong inner understanding of what's important to them and how they feel and what they value, that sometimes it's hard to put that content into a more concrete form, into a more verbal and concise fashion. So if you're an FI type and you feel this way, it's perfectly fine. It might help to try to conceptualize your values so that it's easier for you to act in accordance with them. But if you have this more abstract understanding of your values, like maybe you see an image that is really representative, maybe you have a feeling that you know this is my core value, that's perfectly fine as well. That will also be helpful in guiding you. If you're someone who has introverted thinking, on the other hand, especially TP types, but also FJ types, here I notice a stronger tendency to be able to verbalize the values because they go through the filter of TI. You might struggle a little bit more to identify them on an emotional level, and you might doubt yourself a little bit more in the sense of saying, oh, is this really a value of mine? Or is it rather something else? Is it something that I think I need? Or is it something that other people told me I need? This is something that people with the TI-FE axis can struggle a little bit more. But at the same time, once you spend enough time processing this, maybe even engaging in a coaching process or a therapy process and accessing more of your resources from that perspective, you might find it easier to verbalize and really conceptualize those specific words. If we talk about someone who's a TJ type, they have FI, so especially INTJ, ISTJ who have FI child, they might still kind of float in a similar direction as the FP types, without that much ease in feeling those values, but still kind of going in that direction. And if you're someone who's an ENTJ or an ESTJ with inferior FI, you might find that you might need a mix of the FI and TI descriptions that I kind of went through earlier, in the sense that you might have a feel of what you value, but it will be harder for you to rely on that information like an FP type does, for example. And you might be able to use the thinking function, even though TI is not part of your main stack, but still to use the thinking function to kind of take the content of those kind of more emotional, abstract understandings of your values and turn them into a system, into some pieces of information that you can actually use. So these are the patterns that I noticed, and I think it's important to keep this in mind so we don't compare ourselves with other people and say, oh, like I need to have my values defined in the same way as my friend or my colleague or my partner or my family member. It's okay to have your own way of understanding and embodying these values. And one of my calls to action for you with respect to that is thinking, how can I bring more of that in my life? What are some actions that I can take every day which will bring me closer to embodying my core values? And here you can think of things like, oh, I want to practice this specific hobby more because it connects me to this core value. Or perhaps I want to start learning more and developing more professionally because growth is a core value for me and I'm missing that. Or perhaps you might say, I want to do more sports and exercise because physical health is a value of mine. Regardless of what that might be, take some time to craft some of those action points and start being intentional in terms of embodying that in your life. Hope this was helpful. Really happy to talk to you today about core values and cognitive functions. Hope you enjoyed it and see you next time with another video on typology.